What's going on, everybody? It's Coach and Matt, the FF Mediators, and today we're going to walk through our top 12 Dynasty running backs. We've got a tier list here, so be sure to let us know below who's in your top 12. Like the video, of course, subscribe. But without further ado, Coach, I'm kicking us off with our RB1 is Jahmyr Gibbs, running back for the Detroit Lions. Finished as RB2 this season with over 1,400 rushing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns on the season, added 50 catches through the air with another 4 touchdowns. Absolute monster, can take it to the house at any point in time. I really feel like he's one of the best players in the league, especially on that offense. He is very dangerous. Of course, we've got David Montgomery there, but I'm not too afraid. Coach, how do you feel about Jahmyr Gibbs?
Well, I think Jahmyr Gibbs showed the last 3 or 4 games of the season that he could be the bell cow and he could be the guy, and that David Montgomery wasn't necessarily a necessity for them to be successful. And I think they'll lean on Gibbs more moving forward as a result. Our RB2, we're going to move into RB2 now, is Bijan Robinson. I've always been a big Bijan supporter, but he had me a little worried at the beginning of the year. First couple of games he struggled, but as the season progressed, Bijan got better and better. He had 1,456 rushing yards. He caught 61 passes for 431 yards. Like, he proved that he was worthy of all the hype that he came in with last year. Like, Bijan Robinson, I believe, is going to be the man moving forward.
Yeah, and we'll see if Michael Penix can really open up this offense. But Bijan definitely came into his own towards the end of the season, coming off several games in a row where he went 20 plus points, absolutely dominating on the ground, averaging over 5 yards a carry, scoring touchdowns. Didn't really have a lot of receiving work towards the end of the year, but we also had the switch to Michael Penix, which kind of changed the offense a little bit. So I'm really excited for the future of Bijan. I think it's going to go very well. But let's jump into our next tier, Coach. And kicking us off at 3 is going to be Achane. Running back from Miami has been really surprising. I think a lot of people doubted him because of his size, but the speed has shown in Miami. He had 87 targets with 78 catches, 600 yards through the air with 6 receiving touchdowns. And then on the ground, he had 900 yards. Because he's a little bit smaller, he's not going to quite provide that rushing upside, but this receiving work, if it remains with Tua and the offense in Miami, he's got to have a lot of upside in fantasy to score a ton of PPR points. I mean, he had multiple games of over 7, 8, 9 targets. So watch out for Achane, and if you can go get him, grab him for your roster.
Yeah, he really is explosive, and he's a dual threat running back that really makes a living in the passing game. And like you said, I mean, I just look for that to continue, especially with Tua. He showed an affinity for dumping that ball in the flat to Achane, and that really produces in PPR. That moves me to the next guy. Our next one on the list is Saquon Barkley. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can say here that isn't pretty obvious. I mean, the guy had 2,005 rushing yards, for crying out loud. You kind of hope that he'll get a little more work in the passing game next season, maybe. He had 33 catches, 278 yards. But as a whole, I mean, Saquon Barkley was a monster. That being said, I do think he could get some more touches around the goal line. Jalen Hurts gets a lot of that work. It would be nice if he could get 3 or 4 more touchdown opportunities inside the 5. But still, 2,005 rushing yards, 2,005 rushing yards.
Yeah, while Saquon might be the oldest to kick us off here at the start, there's no real end in sight. I mean, he had his 13 touchdowns this year. This offensive line's a good unit. This team's still competing. Don't see any major changes coming to the core there in Philadelphia. So I'm perfectly comfortable with having Barkley on my team at this in this range at RB4 for us. But let's jump to our next one, Coach, which is RB5, and that's Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving was one of my favorite draft prospects last year. Came onto the scene for the Buccaneers, getting about half the work with Rachaad White there, and he absolutely dominated. He makes people miss like nobody else in the league. Finished the season as RB14 on just halftime, like I said, only 200 attempts, and he had over 1,100 yards with 8 touchdowns, averaging over 5 and almost a half yards per carry. So he's a force to be reckoned with. He can make anybody miss. I'm interested to see what happens with the Bucs going forward, what they do on offense, because Baker has proven himself. This team has been really, really good. But what I do know is Bucky Irving is an absolute buy for me. I know a lot of people are still selling him just because they're not sure what to make of it. But for me, I'm happy to have Bucky on my roster.
Well, Bucky was a guy that I was a little bit concerned about because of his size, but he proved that he can hold his own in pass protection and things like that, which allowed him to get on the field more and more as the season progressed. I do think Bucky would just be a bigger portion of their offense next year. As much as I like to joke around with Matt and hate on Bucky, he's proven that he's explosive and he's just really dang good. Next, that moves us to running back 6, which we have Jonathan Taylor. We know Jonathan Taylor is a monster when he gets handed the football. I mean, he rushed for 1,400 yards again this season. It seems like he does that every year. The concern with Jonathan Taylor might be out of the backfield catching the ball. He had 18 catches. But that's not as much Jonathan Taylor as it is the quarterback issues in Indianapolis, I believe. So I do think moving into next year and the year after that they'll get that situation resolved, and he may even shoot up the list a little higher the next couple of years.
Yeah, double-digit touchdowns for Jonathan Taylor, 3 out of his 5 years in the league. So I don't really see that slowing down going forward. Like you said, if we can get the quarterback position figured out, then hopefully that's just going to translate to a little bit more receiving work for Jonathan Taylor. But as it stands, the guy has been really, really good for fantasy, so I'm happy to have him on my roster. But let's go ahead and jump to number 7, Coach, and that's going to be James Cook. James Cook from the Buffalo Bills had a great season, started off the season really, really hot, but closed out, finishing at RB8, over 1,000 yards on the ground with 16 rushing touchdowns. This is an elite offense that gets to the goal line a lot. Yes, Josh Allen's going to shark some of those touchdowns, but they're happy to run the ball in Buffalo, and they do run the ball in Buffalo. The receivers haven't quite panned out. He's good out of the backfield, had 32 catches, added another 250 yards and a couple touchdowns. So James Cook, only 25 years old, happy to have him on my roster as being a good running back in a good situation.
Yeah, James Cook's really good. Like you said, Josh Allen does steal some of his touchdowns, which is obviously a concern. But the dude can really play. He had 1,009 rushing yards, only 207 attempts. I really like James Cook. He's definitely a guy. If you don't have him, see if you can go get him. That moves us to number 8. Number 8, we have Breece Hall. Now, Breece Hall is a guy that even for me is very underwhelming. His positioning on our list has a lot to do with his value in the dynasty world because of the hype that he came in with as a running back last year. I wouldn't say he's lived up to that. He had 876 rushing yards. For me, he's a guy I would be looking to sell, but his overall dynasty value still remains high because of the name. You do have to figure that the Jets offense will improve, which in turn will help Breece Hall perform a little better over the next couple of years. So that's something you got to lean on. If you don't feel like it's going to, then maybe now's the time to move Breece Hall.
Yeah, I'm with you, Coach. I think this is somebody I'd be looking to move if I could, whether I'm going up on this list or down on this list. I'd be comfortable either way. Was a down year for Breece Hall, only 5 rushing touchdowns. The receiving work's really what floated him. 57 catches for almost 500 yards and 3 touchdowns. So we'll see what happens with the Jets offense. Lots of question marks going into this offseason. But let's jump to number 9 here, Coach, to close out this tier, and that's going to be Kyren Williams. A lot of discussion this offseason about whether Blake Corum was going to eat into Kyren Williams' role, and the answer was absolutely not. Kyren Williams was great for fantasy, finished his RB7 on the season, had 1,300 rushing yards with 14 touchdowns. Once again, McVay and Stafford proven that they know how to get it done, and I'm really happy if I have Kyren Williams on my team because I don't see it slowing down. He's got double-digit touchdowns each of the last 2 years. Great efficiency on the ground, and they're just going to continue to feed the rock to him.
Yeah, and I say all the time, like, in my opinion, Kyren Williams is probably the most underappreciated running back in the NFL. Like, the dude is really good. The offense is really good. Everybody keeps trying to write him off, and then the dude just keeps producing. Which brings us to our RB10, who also, in my opinion, is extremely underappreciated, and that's Josh Jacobs. I don't know if anyone that's watched Green Bay play this year watched Josh Jacobs. I mean, that dude is a dog, man. He is a football player. He is tough. He produced out of the backfield more this year than some expected. There's nothing he can't do. He's extremely tough. He can run between the tackles. He can find a way to get you big yards when it matters. In my opinion, this is a guy that could probably be moved up this list, maybe if you really took a hard look at things here and there. But Josh Jacobs in that offense is really explosive, and Matt LaFleur really got the most out of him.
Yeah, it's RB5 on the season. Like Coach said, if you're in a competing window and you can go and get Jacobs, I absolutely would. I mean, 15 touchdowns this past season, over 1,300 yards, averaging 4.5 a carry. I think that's going to happen again next year. This offense is loaded. They're going to score a bunch of points, and Matt LaFleur is a great coach. So I'm happy to have Josh Jacobs on my team, and I would be going after him if I can. Good question of should he be higher on this list? I think there's some really good arguments for that. But let's get into number 11 on this list, Coach, which is Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker has been a tale of two stories. When he's on the field, he's really good. But the other side of the coin is he misses a lot of time. I'm not sure that I would be buying Kenneth Walker. He might be a sell for me, but as it stands right now, when he plays well, and he gets the ball out of the backfield too. Had 46 catches on the year, had 7 rushing touchdowns. So when he plays, he finds the end zone. Coach, how do you feel about Kenneth Walker?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Matt. Kenneth Walker, the issue is it's funny that he's our number 11 running back here. That's how many games he played this year. He played 11, which is concerning because it may be a trend with him. Hopefully not. So it's an interesting position. If you're an owner of Kenneth Walker, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to hold? Do you want to sell? I mean, for me, I'd probably hold and see how he goes. Like, if he could get to where he plays a full slate of games, then he's going to be really good. So you got to kind of hope for that moving forward. That brings us to running back number 12, is a guy that really burst on the scene this year, and Chase Brown. A lot of people in the offseason were high on him, and his name was being floated a lot in the offseason. I know this is a guy that Matt's been all over the place with. It is concerning somewhat his pass pro, and that he's off the field every now and then when they're in passing downs. But at the same time, the guy can run the football. And we pointed out earlier, Matt pointed out when we were discussing that, the draft is going to tell us a lot about Chase Brown. If he survives the draft and they don't go get another running back, then you can tell that Chase Brown is their guy moving forward. If that's the case, if you believe that's the case, now, in my opinion, is the time to buy Chase Brown. Some people would argue that, but for me, like, I would like to see if I can go get him for cheap and see what happens.
Yeah, like Coach said, I've been real hot and cold on Chase Brown. I've definitely had my critiques on him. But like you said, if he survives the draft, then his value is going to shoot up. So if you have conviction about him, absolutely go and buy him right now. I mean, 54 catches. The receiving work was great. Had almost 1,000 yards on the ground. We'll just have to see. I mean, a lot of it is going to depend on the draft. But for me, I think the names that we didn't mention are interesting, Coach. We've left off Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, Joe Mixon, several other names. And, of course, we haven't even talked about the rookies yet. This does not include the rookies. We've got a lot to look forward as we move into the offseason. But be sure to let us know below who you're picking in your top 12 Dynasty running backs. Be sure to like the video and give us a subscription. We appreciate your time. And until next time, we will catch you later.